Dearest gentle listener, I am Lady Elizabeth of Neowatterton of Rieslingshire, and I am joined by my lovely co-host today, Lady Louise Dr. Pepperton of Tobyshire. And today we are going to be diving into the Bridgerton Prozaic Universe. Just kidding, it's me. It's Nikki and Meg.
And I would like to apologize to any listeners of British descent for Nikki's accent.
I'm sorry, that was completely legit. I am a star of stage and screen.
She is Canadian.
Y'all, we're talking about Bridgerton today.
I have dipped my toe in Bridgerton, but you have immersed yourself in the Bridgerton universe.
Yes. So Meg, tell me, what has been your exposure, your experience to, again, what I'm coining, and I'm very proud of this term, the Bridgerton Prozaic Universe
versus the Marvel Cinematic Universe. My experience with Bridgerton is very limited. I read about half the books in the series in 2021, and I read them and I never really thought about them again until it came, and it was after Netflix had released it. So people were talking about Bridgerton. Otherwise, I maybe never would have touched them at all. So what is your life experience with the Bridgertons?
So I have read all of the books, all 8 of them. I have read the Happily Ever After set of epilogues, and I have read some of the anthologies that Julia Quinn wrote with the other ones. So I was very much one of those fans when it was going into production with Shonda Rhimes, Shondaland, and Netflix. I was very much one of those people of oh, well, I've read the books, so I hope they do a good job. But I remember very vividly sending my mother, who has also read them, the first trailer for season 1 and kind of going, oh, damn, this actually looks good. I love film and TV production. So when I saw the trailer, I was like, this production value is on point. The costumes look beautiful. The design looks phenomenal. The wit and the repartee in the trailer seemed really good. So when that happened, I decided to go back and reread the books. And then I remember after season 1 finished, I reread the entire series again to kind of figure out, from what I remember, this is what I'm seeing in the show that was different from the book. And then now that I've seen the show, I kind of want to go back and really do a deeper dive. Because of course, anytime there's a literary adaptation of something that's gone into production and people start seeing it, so much of the immediate discussion is about what is different and what did they do well or what did they do poorly on. So I have, since seen everything of the show that's been published to date, season 1 and 2. And I've seen Queen Charlotte, which I actually just rewatched last week. And then at the time of this recording, season 3, part 1 is coming out in about 3 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
Mid-May. Part 2 coming out about a month after that. Yeah. So I'm a fan. I am a fan of both the books and the TV show. I think they've both done some really good things. And I'm also excited to talk about it just as why the hell do we love Regency romance? What is going on with this time period that we are just obsessed with? I think part of it has to do with Colin Firth in a pond in a see-through, damp, white shirt. I feel like that kicked off a lot of it.
Yeah, that Pride and Prejudice, the obsession that people have with Pride and Prejudice as an opportunity for retelling a classic story, I think is a big part of the Regency. Even though Pride and Prejudice was Pride and Prejudice written in the Regency or set in the Regency, or was it Georgian?
It's set during the Regency period. So let's give a little bit of history, shall we? A little bit of background on the books and the genre itself. The books are set between 1813 and 1827, so Regency period, and then a few years beyond that. And they were released from 2000 to 2006, so they are fairly modern. But just as I think, I'm oh yeah, that was 24 years ago. The book series talks about the 8 Bridgerton children who are named in alphabetical order from their time of birth. So we have Anthony, Benedict, Colin, Daphne, Eloise, Francesca, Gregory, and Hyacinth, as well as their mother, Violet.
I just want to say what a smart marketing move this was to alphabetize the children.
You know what? Lady Whistledown actually has a comment on that it speaks of too much organization to have them named alphabetically as it relates to their birth order. I think it's very fun. And for the most part, the books are, for the most part, released in the order of the children's ages, with the exception of the first book. The first book is Daphne's, even though she is the fourth child. And then Gregory and Hyacinth, being the two youngest siblings, their books are actually shifted around. And the reason for that, Julia Quinn has said, is that women typically married younger than men in this period. So if we did them all in age order, by the time Daphne would get married, for example, being the fourth born child, she would almost be older than she likely would have been in that time period.
She would have been considered a spinster at that point. Like, she would have been considered off the market.
Pretty much you're a spinster if you've been on the market for like more than 2 years.
Right.
You're kind of like on the shelf, which is why Penelope, who is the character we'll talk about, is kind of interesting, because I believe she's in her third or fourth season. But Daphne is, in fact, going into her second season in the books, not her first, like in the show. So this was a popular series. She also released an additional book called The Bridgertons Happily Ever After in 2013 that essentially took bonus epilogues for each couple. So like the 10 years later, the 15 years later, the 2 years later, that were contained in some of the books themselves or released in special anthologies. She did put them together into one collection. She also added in a story about Violet and how she and Edmund met, which is a beautiful, beautiful book, because Edmund and Violet's relationship in the series is great. She's also written some Lady Whistledown anthologies with some other authors. Of course, when the Bridgerton TV show came out and Queen Charlotte was created, Queen Charlotte was not a character in the books, nor was it a separate book. She and Shonda Rhimes wrote the novelization of the series as well. And, the Bridgertons really, they're probably Julia Quinn's most well-known work, especially now with the release of the series. The thing I find kind of funny with the Bridgerton series is Julia Quinn never meant to write all of the kids. Like, to your point, Meg, when we talked in a previous episode about Born in Ice, that you want to set, especially when you have like an extended universe or a book series about multiple people within the same world, in this case, it's siblings, you want to make sure that people care about everyone, so they keep reading. Julia Quinn only meant this to really be about the first 4 kids, like Anthony, Bennett, Colin, and Daphne. That was her only plan. But then people really loved Eloise, Francesca, Gregory, and Hyacinth, that she did actually decide to write the rest of the books. It was originally not in her plan at all.
And that's where I stopped. So maybe that's part of the reason, is it felt like it was a natural breaking point, because that was her original intention. So she set up Anthony, Benedict, Colin, Daphne, or in whatever order that is. And then it almost felt like a generational gap that happened there too.
It did. Because if you think about, even in the TV show, the actor for Francesca has changed, because Caroline is probably going to be kicking off this season. So she has to be older. So they have changed actresses for her. And Gregory and Hyacinth have also changed actors, I believe, in the upcoming season, because they have aged. But if you look at ABCD and Eloise as well, Daphne is already married. Anthony just got married. Colin, spoiler alert, is about to get in a relationship this season. What? Oh my God. Benedict is, technically we are doing things out of order, because Benedict's storyline has not happened yet, and people are waiting with bated breath for Benedict's storyline, but he is an elder son.
It was my least favorite of the first 4 by a long shot.
So. Yeah, but like, I really liked his book, but it's coming. And Eloise, I have no idea what's going to happen with her storyline in the show, because it is so completely deviated from the book. So there's a lot going on from a pop culture phenomenon, but the books themselves, pretty good. Pretty decent. I like them. What was your general feeling, since you only read the first couple of books? Like, what was your general feeling about the family and the characters?
I do really love a strong family dynamic. I appreciated the interwovenness of the books with each other, especially when you do set up, here is a giant family. Like, they are going to be in each other's business. They are going to be making these decisions. And I liked the structure of the family, where the previous Viscount has passed already. And so, like, the son is taking on the mantle of his father's legacy. Like, there's a lot of depth within the family structure. I think it was a little tame for me. Like, I wanted more sex on page. I wanted it to be spicier. I wanted it to be a little bit.
We want some horny Regency.
Exactly. And a lot of the Regency that I'd read was either published more recently than that, so like Tessa Dare, Sarah MacLean, or if it was contemporary to that, it was Lisa Kleypas, which is a bit spicier. It's just like, for my personal tastes, I felt like this was a little tame.
Yeah, so you've consumed other literature by that point that was spicier, that was a little more out there. If these came out 2000, 2006, I probably read them originally very close to their original publication date, if not as they were coming out. If anything, I probably started when the first 5 or 6 were already out and just kind of caught up to the last 2. So again, me and my predilection for reading books at a very young age. I would have been in high school when these books came out. I would have been graduating high school when they came out. So, being 17, 18 and reading these, again, like your perception of physical attraction
And I think
in books
also,
is
like,
different.
maybe there's something about these, especially the heroines being younger, where you as a 17-year-old might have related to them, whereas I as a 35-year-old was like, oh my God, these teenagers are so young and dumb. It's because there's a little bit, and like maybe that there's something we can talk about here in the Regency about it being like, by its very nature, Regency has a coming of age component within its tropes, because we're on the marriage market, because that is in some ways like that is the role of the women, is they are coming of age to run their households, like they are marrying up, and there's some classism happening, but like that to me, like that is not the most interesting plot line. So I think that's also part of the reason why I was like, once I've figured out this like big, the big surprise of who is the lady Whistledown or whatever, like I was just like, okay, I'm good. I don't need to chase off, and like I liked the setting. I didn't need to chase off into like book 5. So for me, I'm also not as fast of a reader as you are. So like you can crank through a series much faster than I can. Whereas I'm like, I have committed to 4 books, and 4 books is all I needed. So maybe you can convince me to read the next 4. But for me right now, I'm like, my TBR is too long to invest in something that is not going to be spicy enough for me.
The benefit to having a continued extended universe like this that follows the same family is it does allow Julia Quinn to really play with tropes. So here's just a brief rundown of the tropes we find in each of these books.
I love that.
Book 1, Duke and I, is Simon and Daphne. It's fake relationship. Daphne is in her second year on the marriage mart, and the reason she's not married is because everybody sees her as their pal. She's my pal, Daphne. She's not desirable, which is actually, in my mind, that's one of the things I wish they had kept in the series. In the series, she's like, sorry, in like the TV series, it's her first season. She's just being launched, and she's so like beautiful and lovely and nice and kind. But she's like, I am here on the marriage mart to help prospects. In the book, she was everybody's buddy.
Yeah, it was more like Girl Next Doory, where people were like, I don't want to marry her.
So that when they create this fake relationship, Simon wanting this because he doesn't want to be bothered by all these marriage-minded mamas, he does it for Daphne so she can be desirable because nobody sees her as desirable. So that's the fake relationship is the main trope in the first book. The second book, Viscount Who Loved Me, is Anthony and Kate, who some of my favorites. That is kind of your typical enemies to lovers. An Offer from a Gentleman is book 3, and that's Benedict and Sophie, which has not been translated for TV yet. It's a Cinderella story, literally. There is a mask, there is a ball. It's an interclass romance in that one as well, and there's a little bit of like that aspect of the Cinderella story after the ball and after they meet and then they part. Is this? I'm starting to have feelings with this person, but I don't know that we've actually met before, and I don't know who this person is, but they know me, like that type of like relationship going on, which I really liked in that book. Book 4, Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, is Colin and Penelope. So that is the upcoming season 3 of the TV show. That is Friends to Lovers. That is Best Friend's Brother. That is like Unrequited Love, because Penelope's been in love with Colin for years at this point, which I find really sweet and nice. And then you add on the whole Lady Whistledown thing on top of that. So that's kind of fun. The next book is To Sir Philip with Love, which is Philip and Eloise. This one, I'm fascinated to see how they're going to adapt for television because they have changed Eloise so much in the TV show. But this is like a marriage of convenience. It has some epistolary qualities to it. There's letter writing. They are pen pals. And there's also a bit of like a Beauty and the Beast thing going on with To Sir Philip with Love. And it does deal with some pretty tough topics. There is mental health involved in that book. There is suicide. There is young traumatized children. So that book is definitely one of the heavier ones. The next book is one of my favorites, and it is one of the reasons that I think the Bridgerton fandom is very excited to see Francesca aged up in this series, because Francesca's book is phenomenal. It's called When He Was Wicked. It's Francesca and Michael. And it's about the tropes in that one are friends to lovers, dead brother's wife, a widow finding love again. It's very well written. It's also like that, the rakish Earl, I believe he becomes the Earl in this book, changing his ways because he's so in love. Like he's the one that's like, I have to change. So I love When He Was Wicked. The last 2 books, Gregory and Hyacinth, they're fine. It's In His Kiss is Hyacinth and Garrus. It's like a mystery kind of like there's involved like a translation of a diary that's in a foreign language that only she knows how to speak, so he needs her to translate the book. And On the Way to the Wedding is Gregory and Lucy, which is the last book. Again, that's kind of friends to lovers, accidental marriage. I have to marry because reasons, and then I get saved from this marriage for reasons. But again, like there's so many like differences in here. There's really interesting plot points that are, for the most part, fairly unique for each sibling, which I do appreciate. I love a good like variety of tropes.
Yeah, especially since you can explore all of them without it being like sounding like it's problematic, where you're jumping around too much and chaotic.
Okay, let's talk about some of the more controversial aspects of this, because it was of a time.
Mm-hmm.
The Bridgerton series were written in the early aughts, but set in Regency. We can look at things in a historical context because of that's just how it was back then. But also realizing that the authors, when they wrote this, is fairly contemporary.
Right. The consent was not as important 25 years ago when book one was written than it is now, because of the Me Too movement, because of the ways that sexual assault on college campuses has been reported. Like, it's really, and reading it, in 2021 is going to feel different than reading it in 2001. That 20-year gap, even though it's set of a time 200 years ago, it's like it didn't hit right with me because of that. And like, as a writer, I was like, she could have just gotten him drunk. But then it's not.
So for those
it's
of
not Daphne
who's not have,
anyway. Sorry.
So for those of you who may not have read this scene in the book or seen the scene in the show, Simon, due to his backstory and the circumstances that lead to him marrying Daphne, he says to her, "I cannot give you children." She takes this to mean that he is infertile. He cannot have children. But it turns out that basically just instead of, I hate the fact I'm about to say the sentence, coming inside of her, he pulls out. And because she is so ignorant about what sex is, she does not know that this is why she's not pregnant yet. Because again, she believes him to be infertile. When she does find out that he is doing this on purpose, and he could in fact give her children, they have an argument about it. And one night he comes home drunk and she essentially coerces him into sex. I'm going to straight up say it. She coerces him. He is drunk. He cannot give consent. And he essentially, when he tries to dislodge her, I'll say, again, the fact that I'm describing this is weird.
It is.
She holds on twixt her thighs with great strength, so that he does, in fact, oh my God, come inside her. And then when he realizes that she has done this, they don't speak.
Yeah.
And for much longer do they not speak than they do in the TV show. He actually moves out. He says, "I don't want to talk to you. Only talk to me to tell me whether or not you are pregnant. Otherwise, we are not speaking." And she hopes and tells them that she is. He comes to town and it turns out, no, she was just late. And she is not, in fact, pregnant. So, yeah, let's talk about this scene. Because this is when the season of the show aired and this scene happened. It happened a little bit differently than in the books, but very much the same thing. It was controversial when it came out in the books. It was controversial when it came out in the show. Meg, what are your thoughts? Because this...
it's like, from a modern perspective, it's very uncomfortable, but also like to an extent, because of the era in which this is written. And like, I also think that one of the reasons that Regency as an era is so popular is because there is this sort of rising industrial middle class. There's a rising feminism. Women are able to do more, but they still are held back. And so you get some of these modern heroines who are put up against more kind of traditional patriarchal heroes. Like there's some clashing of modern sentimentality on what is historically not accurate. It is a really interesting storytelling technique. And so like, from a storytelling perspective, this is interesting because it's Daphne finally stepping into the choice that she can make, because her choices as a heroine are limited, and he has made choices for her without her consent, without her full understanding. He has kept her intentionally ignorant about the choices that he's making by not giving her all the facts, and the fact that she doesn't have good sex education has made her vulnerable in this situation. And like, nobody's gonna, at the time, nobody's going to come out and be like, "Oh, this is how babies are made." Like eventually when she does figure it out, then she chooses to take this action against her husband, who has basically like tied her hands, not in a cool way.
Yeah.
So like, is it something that in modern, review of this plot line is uncomfortable for us to be a part of? Yes. Is it probably still the right character choice for Julia Quinn to make based on the circumstance that she's put them in? Yes, it probably still is.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, there is this very clear third act breakup that isn't a like, oh, we had a misunderstanding. We didn't talk to each other and now we're going to break up and then we'll get back together and everything will be fine. You know, like it's a very strong character driven conflict. So in discussing the storytelling of the book, I'm like, yeah, actually I do like the choice, but as a reader, I didn't like
As a
the
reader.
choice.
Yeah, it was really challenging because the thing that also leads up to this in the book is like her finding out this is what he's doing. And I'm going to refer to it as an assault. They weren't speaking. Like this, it's not like she found out one day and like 2 days later he came home drunk and she's like, this is my moment. It was, she finds out and she says, we're not going to have sex anymore at all because you don't want kids. Like you lied to me about this kid thing. And then he's so depressed by the fact that this rift has happened between them in their relationship because they were pretty happy. And I think they did do a good job of showing that in the show. But he gets really depressed and goes out and drinks and he's barely conscious and he does protest during the act. And it's just, again, like it's so interesting. You know, I love female characters that fuck up. I like it when they're bad. I like it mean. Like I don't think that to give more visibility to female characters, they all have to be great. This is a bad thing that she does, but to your point, it makes sense for her character because when she asks Violet, her mother, you know, what is marital duties and what is my wedding night and what is all this? Violet, much like she does in the show, it's very similar, is like, oh, it's a beautiful, but like gives her zero practical information that in some ways I'm just gonna be like, Violet, that was your fault.
Yeah.
Like in a way. But like the fact that makes me think that Daphne had no idea what sex was or how it worked or how pregnancy worked, that it makes me think, does she even understand consent in this situation?
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Does
Like
she
she
know what
doesn't
that
know
is?
that this would be wrong to do because I mean like there might be some sort of like moral compass gut reaction,
Yeah.
but if you're not educated enough to know that both parties need to be consenting and you are just told like my husband is supposed to behave this way and he hasn't been, like maybe maybe this modern sensibility around it, I'm judging her too harshly.
It's really interesting. Like I was very uncomfortable when I read it and I was comfortable when I watched it.
Because there isn't consent, but there is agency, right? Like in the moment, Simon doesn't have agency, but Daphne does. She's able to say, I am going to make this decision that impacts my future. I am going to take this action, even though maybe there is some internal conflict about whether or not this is the right choice. But like, she has so little agency in her life. There are so few things she has to, you know, take her. And this is part of the Regency, you know, ecosystem
Genre.
is
Yeah.
she is only good for her hand in marriage and her uterus, right? Like, and she has to take her husband's name and move into her husband's house, and none of these decisions are hers. And this is a decision that she can make to you know, have the future that she wants, that she thought was not available to her because of, you know, Simon making out with her in a garden or something, you know?
Yeah. I do like this idea, as you mentioned, of like she has agency for better or for worse, for right or for wrong. She made this decision and she was able to make that. And I think that is interesting. It's almost like there's a lesson in here. Just because you made a decision does not mean it was a good one. I am happy, though, that, again, going back to our Born in Ice episode when we talked about, like, what if there had been a pregnancy in this, it just makes me think of, like, what would have happened to their relationship if it turned out she had been pregnant from that incident. I don't think the relationship could have recovered, nor do I think it should have, if that had actually happened.
Yeah, I remember being really relieved when she got her period, that this was not the circumstance that would bring them back together as part of that third act breakup, that he would come back to her because of reconciliation, not because of an obligation.
Yeah. So like it is kind of good. Again, their reconciliation happens a little bit differently in the book versus TV show, whatever. But, you know, but they do reconcile. The secondary epilogue for The Duke and I is written that by the time Daphne is 41, they have 5 children together, and then she's pregnant with the 5th one in the epilogue, and it's very much
At
them
41
like,
years old.
We are so happy. Yeah, I was like, to have five in the Regency era at that. But he's a duke. They got wet nurses. They got servants.
That's
They
true.
they got all those things. So I think one of the things that comes up a lot when we talk about historical romances, regardless of the time period when they're set, is often around the role of women and the power that they have or don't have, and how they strive to perhaps change that.
And I wonder how much of that is historically accurate and how much of that is now just what you expect of a Regency era romance. Like, I mean, I've read some books about the history of marriage, and there, for a long
Mm-hmm.
time, the idea of marrying for love, like I read romances, historical romances, and there's like, oh, they were a love match. And like, that was just not a thing that people considered at the time in the historical books, in the books that are actually telling the history, not the fiction. It's like, well, why
Yeah.
would love be involved in this? Why does that matter? That's not what you're here for. Like if you want love, go have sex with your mistress. Not like, you're here because you have land. You're here because we have to like eke out a living because life is hard in this time period. And I feel like that might also be one of the
Mm-hmm.
reasons that the Regency starts this sort of, and Pride and Prejudice as a seminal text is very much like, oh, like, yes, what's the name of that family? Elizabeth.
The Bennets.
The Bennets have some money, so they can choose who they end up with versus, needing
Mm-hmm.
to make a choice based on only politics, only money, only land
Mm-hmm.
ownership, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
they finally, because of this rise of the middle class, they're able to make some decisions based on emotion instead of on finances.
Yeah. And I think that's it. I was reading an article. It was on CNN Style, written by AJ Willingham. This is back in like July 22. Again, a lot of more scholarship was coming out around this period because of the popularity of the Bridgerton series. And they were kind of saying like, why Regency? Like, why is this such like a popular period? And it's like, they talk about the fantasy of it all. To watch a period romance or pick up a novel is to lose oneself in a world of silk ball gowns and walled gardens. So there is a romantic allure of a time without the internet or Instagram, even, as they say, if it was also a time without penicillin or equal rights. So there's a lot of books set in this period. They do focus on kind of the sartorial choices, like the fashion and how deliberate it is. There's witty, subtle dialogue, and there's tension, even if there can't be contact, because this is not the era of casual sex. This is,
Mhm.
for women at least, you are a virgin until you are married. But this idea that there's like this simmering tension. I love a good pining and like a good yearning. I'm here for that. But it's also a time of like social change. Like we're on the eve of the Industrial Revolution. Social systems are changing. There is a lot of scholarship coming out on this point for women. You will read in certain series of this time about, the blue stockings, women who are like, I want to learn because I didn't go to school like my brother did. I didn't go to Eton. I didn't go to Oxford and, learn Greek and all these things and all these languages. Like, if anything, they are learning how to speak. They're learning how to run a household,
Maybe some
embroidery,
music,
music, right? So, like,
poetry.
I think it is exactly, which is always my favorite scenes. Like, would you like to hear some of my poetry?
No.
Oh, I would not. I'm very good at the piano forte. No, no, thank you.
There's something about
Mm-hmm.
the Regency that it's not just that there's like a higher volume of books that are being produced, but there's a supply and demand happening here where, I think I've heard Sarah McLean say on her podcast that even though because she has these series that continue, sometimes they roll from Regency to Victorian, and she'll have people, because it's
Mm-hmm.
like the difference between 1818 and 1820. Like, not that much
Yeah.
changes in these 2 years, but turns out people have to age. And so technically she's talking about Victorian era heroines instead of Regency era heroines. And her publishers are like, but can't we make it Regency though? Because there are
Yeah.
people who will say, I won't read out of Regency, even though it's the same series, even though it's the same characters. There's this sort of like cultural romance phenomenon of whatever happened in these 8 years is my favorite.
It is interesting because, again, the Regency period is extremely short.
Yeah.
Extremely short. So if you think about, how can 1% of time make up for like X percentage of the historical books that get published, like I can definitely see like there's something appealing about that era in that, it's old enough that you can have things like, oh, there is society and there's no technology. It's a little bit more straightforward what everybody's expectations were of you, for good or for bad. You kind of knew what they were. But, also, I'm not worried that people are out rolling around in their own shit and like they can clean themselves. But it's also, I was thinking about, because one of the ones you mentioned was the Tudors, like Henry VIII was set in the Tudors, and the TV show with Jonathan Rhys Meyers kind of set back then. They were filthy. But also, if you piss someone off, you could get executed for it. That isn't as much of a threat at this point.
It's true. And probably the same for Vikings. Like, if you're going to have a Viking novel, then you're going to be dirty. It's going to be dirty.
It's dirty, it's smelly, and you are very likely going to get killed by somebody in charge. Whereas in the Regency period and soon after that, like the risks are different. The risks aren't so much like I could be executed at any moment. The risks are, who am I going to marry? And sure, there's a lot of stuff that comes around with like who women end up marrying and what that means for their life and their future. But like, it's almost like a less threatening, more like bucolic. Is that the word? Like idyllic.
I think bucolic is like a vista, like a landscape. I think we're like utopian almost.
In a way, yeah, because it's like, oh, what a world of beautiful dresses and witty repartee, and me with a fan, and we have all these fancy dances that we can do. I'd love to talk a little bit about some of the key differences between the books and the show of what we've seen in terms of how that's taken what readers liked about the Regency era, but also modernized it for the new crowd who is watching Netflix.
Yes.
So I think that's kind of fascinating in that way, but also, yeah, kind of seeing how things evolve in terms of what is important to us in a story and what do we love about these edits. Because a few weeks ago, I met an author named Melody Edwards, and she does, her first 2 books have come out, traditionally published, and they are modern retellings of classic novels. So the first one is called Jane and Edward, which is a retelling of Jane Eyre, and it's set in Toronto's Bay Street, which is like the financial district. The book that just came out, which is, I went to the book launch event that was here in Niagara, it's based on Persuasion, Jane Austen's Persuasion. Once persuaded, twice shy, I think. Oh. And one of the questions I asked her when I met her at this event was, you've done these classic retellings. Clearly, back in the day, there were certain things happening, mostly around women's roles and consent, that just would not fly today. So how did you address that in your novel? And she goes, well, obviously in the first book, I couldn't really talk about, because we don't just keep wives locked in attics anymore.
Honestly.
So how did I address that? And Persuasion, one of the things she said that I found was really interesting, or in her version of Persuasion, was this idea that, well, in Persuasion, like Jane Austen's novel, which was a Regency novel, Wentworth and the main character's name, who I cannot remember right now, they had a relationship when they were younger and now don't speak. But because of societal rules, they have to constantly be around each other. Whereas Melody Edwards said, in present day, if your ex was going to be at an event, you would just get up and leave.
Yeah.
But that's not possible. So how do I take that and put them together in a modern context, even though they really don't want to be around each other? But that's what moves the plot forward. So she comes up with all these reasons about like the project they're working on together and et cetera, et cetera. So like, that's an example of, I think, taking the heart and style of something from a historical context, updating it for a modern audience, but not really like fucking with it completely, because how it was written previously was important and was therefore a reason. But we are kind of tweaking and modernizing it a little bit.
And that's not easy to modernize, something that is so of the time, but like the themes can be consistent and you can figure out ways to retell it and adapt it to modern times. I think that's really a clever way to approach it, especially because the publishing research shows that adaptations are very easy to sell.
So I think with all of like these changes to bring things into the modern era, but keeping the essence of what was past, we look at the TV show, and the first thing that kind of pops up is obviously the different look of the characters. Shonda has incorporated people of color, which was definitely not a thing when the books were originally written.
In the books. Yeah.
Yeah. In the books. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They were all white folk. They were so many white folks. But, in this, you have the queen being involved. She was not a character in the books, but I actually really like having her perspective in there. It's like, what is a royal perspective on what is happening. The Featheringtons are much larger characters in the TV show. They're mentioned obviously in the books, but they're nowhere near as big. But they've also included like Will Mondrich and his wife. He's the boxer, and it looks like he and his wife actually have a much bigger storyline coming up in season 3. Lady Danbury, oh my god, I love her. She's great in the books, but she's definitely a smaller character. But she is.
I love like a snarky grandma character.
Oh, I love her. She is good. Like she still has that walking stick in the book. And there's definitely still the thing of like, oh shit, Lady Danbury, go before she sees that. She's like, I see you. And I was like, I love this bitch. So, you know, I love expanding that in. Obviously, you've got Penelope's cousin Marina, who was in season 1 primarily. That character exists in the books, but she dies off page in Eloise's book. Like she's not even a part of the storyline from the get-go. Obviously, Simon is made black. You have the Sharmas from season 2, who are Indian. Again, they were white folk in the original.
This isn't quite Hamilton, where you can have sisters and like one is black and one is Asian and one is Latina. You can't quite do that here. But, you know, being able to have the love interests be people of color was a smart choice for a Shonda show, especially.
I think so. You know, it is Shonda. I feel like she would have to do that. So this idea of like quote unquote colorblind casting was a big part. Another big change was around like Eloise, like her feminist attitude did not really exist in the books at all. You have the additional characters like Sienna, who was the opera singer from season 1, who is Anthony's mistress. She's not a part of the series. Mistresses in the books are kind of unnamed, just random women that you run into at fancy brothels. You know, Benedict's art school, he is an artist in the book, but it's not this huge thing where he goes to art school and tries to get in there. That's not really, and Benedict's potentially queer thing in the series. Like this has gone back and forth with a lot of folks in the fandom on whether they are actually setting him up to be queer or if his exposure to queer people, like that other artist, and his apparent like open marriage with his wife is more to express Benedict like going against the norm rather than him actually being queer. Because everybody loves Sophie, so people are kind of already like, don't make him gay. And I'm just curious to see where this is going to go, because I don't know. Daphne's personality not being one of the guys was a change again. I did not like. I liked that idea of her being one of the guys. Yeah, so I am really curious to see what is going to happen in season 3. I don't know.
Based on the trailer, what are your expectations for part 1 of season 3? And maybe we can do like I'll actually watch it. Okay, I will actually. I haven't watched any of it, but I'll just dive into season 3.
So here's the thing that's I think really interesting in the book series. You do not find, spoiler alert if you haven't watched the show, Penelope is Lady Whistledown. She is a writer, and she's been using this because she is a wallflower who's been ignored to kind of comment on society because she believes everybody to be full of shit. So she is Lady Whistledown. You do not find out about that until her book. So we found that out at the end of season 1. So that as a plot point, the reveal isn't going to be as big. And again, if you saw the show, Eloise found out at the end of season 2, and now their friendship is broken, which is why in the trailers for season 3, you see her heading out, or Eloise hanging out with Cressida Cowper, uber bitch. So that is interesting to find out, because one of the things I loved about Penelope and Colin's book was Colin being the third son. He loves to travel, but he doesn't feel that he has anything to offer the world. Anthony is the Viscount. Benedict has his art, and at some point Benedict actually becomes famous for his art. He's a renowned landscape painter. But Colin's like, I don't have a thing, and this makes me feel bad. Like, I have nothing to offer the world. I'm the third born son. I'm never going to have a title. Like, I'm effectively useless. So when he finds out actually that Penelope is Lady Whistledown, his first thought is, I'm jealous. Because you actually have something.
Yeah.
You have something that I want so desperately, which is purpose. He disagrees with the fact that she does this entirely. He's worried for her. He tells her, they start falling in love, and he tells her, you have to stop this. If you want us to be together, you cannot do this anymore. And she's kind of like, get fucked. Like, this is my thing. I am a writer. And
it comes back to agency and like, what can a woman do in society right now? If there are things you don't like, if you want to express yourself.
Yeah. So then, eventually Penelope helps him see that all of his travel journals are so well written. So he actually starts publishing his journals and becomes really well known for his writing. So it's a pair of writers, which is really cute. And there is a little bit of a mystery when Lady Whistledown, aka Penelope, does write a piece that says, "I'm retiring, so long and thanks for all the fish," right? To quote Hitchhiker's Guide.
I was just going to say, where's the Hitchhiker's Guide coming into Regency?
Hitchhiker's
Guide. I'll take
so
it.
So long and thanks for all,
thanks the, for
fish.
All the fish.
But then Cressida announces that, no, I'm Lady Whistledown, because Lady Danbury's essentially said, whoever can unmask Lady Whistledown, I'm going to give money. Cressida says, it's me. Danbury's like, I don't believe you and I want proof. And Penelope is so hurt that Cressida would lay claim to her legacy as Lady Whistledown that she goes back to being Lady Whistledown and says, nope, that bitch ain't it. She has never been Lady Whistledown. I will not allow her to besmirch my name. But in that announcement, she uses a turn of phrase that Cressida realizes is Penelope. So she goes to Penelope and starts to blackmail her and says, you have to do this. And everything, gets fixed. There's a happy ending. So with the show, I feel like what is going to be the break between part 1 and part 2? Is it going to be Colin figuring out that Penelope is Lady Whistledown? Or is it going to be Cressida blackmailing her and saying, I know you are. If you don't want to ruin your relationship with Colin, because maybe at this point in the show, Colin doesn't know. Maybe they've changed that. Like, you either stop this or give me all your money or whatever, or I tell Colin, who has now just started to like you, I'm going to tell him that you're Lady Whistledown. And clearly he's going to be upset and he's going to throw you away and whatever. So I'm very curious. And also, actually, in the trailer, they've shown that she does want to get married because she wants to get out of her mother's house, because her mother is, I love the actress. She's phenomenal in the show, who plays Lady Featherington, but the character is harsh. So I don't know. I'm really curious to see. I hope that obviously Eloise and Penelope are going to reconcile. I wonder what is going to be the incident that allows them to do that. Is it going to be the blackmail from Cressida? Is it going to be Colin kind of taking Eloise to task and saying, stop being a bitch to your best friend? Because Lady Danbury and the Queen trying to find out who Whistledown is in seasons 1 and 2. And Brimsley, the Queen's right-hand dude, has also been involved in the search. So I'm like, now that the Queen is an extra specter of being found out,
it raises the stakes.
It really does raise the stakes to have like that royalty involved, because now it's not just the public finding out that she is Whistledown. It's not just Colin. Eloise already knows what happens if the Queen finds out, because she has said some bad things about the Queen.
Okay, so I think that when we take a novel and we adapt it to screen, we have to move faster. We have to be brighter, and screenplays as a whole, they just like, you don't have as much nuance because people just aren't paying as much attention. You don't have there's so much more saturation to the storytelling because you can tell it in so many different ways. You can tell it with a look, which you can't do in a novel. So based on what you just told me, I read the book, but not having seen season 1 or season 2, the question that I think would be interesting for us to predict right now going into this is, what is the break between part 1 and part 2? Because if I recall correctly, each of them are 4 episodes long, right? Part 1 and part 2. So it is going to be, if you want to double check that. If that's the case, if it's evenly split, and we want to think of, season 3 is the entire season, but we have a midpoint turning point. Probably when I think about what's a midpoint shift, where does the A plot, B plot crossover happen? I'm like, when you write a midpoint, you want there to be a moment of truth that leads to the change in behavior. So my guess is that it is Colin finding out. And that's sort of the rising action of this is Penelope and Colin are going to start to hang out. They're going to fall in love. He is going to start to care for her. They're going to probably do it, and then maybe not. I don't remember how all that works. But the moment of truth for him, where she has to figure out how trustworthy he is and whether she can trust him with the secret. And then he has to determine if he can support her doing something that's so risky.
Yeah, it'll be interesting too because to your point about like the main storyline, which is Colin Penelope, there's not a lot of real estate when you put in all the additional characters they're adding for this season, like if we think about the existing character base at the end of the last season and in Queen Charlotte, because Queen Charlotte released in between two, and now there's the point, like Violet is thinking about finding herself a lover. Kate and Anthony are back, and from the production photos that were just released a couple days ago, it looks like Kate is pregnant in this one. They've added a bunch of new characters, including a sexy widow character who looks like she might kind of break some hearts with some of the characters on here. A lot of folks predict that she might be Sophie's stepmother, just with a different name, and that's how Sophie's going to come into the story. The Mondriches looks like they have a bigger plot line, that they've actually gone out of him just being a boxer, and there's been, again, some production photos shown with them having a much bigger house, so perhaps they are ascending up into society. So what are they going to do there? You have the end of Queen Charlotte, with the king still being very sick, but one of her sons, who had just married, is pregnant because she was just looking for an heir in the series. That was the big plot line for Queen Charlotte. So with all of those things happening, I hope they leave enough time for Colin and Penelope to breathe. And just because I'm a little concerned with how they've divided it up, that it's just going to be so much. And then nobody's going to have a full like expansive storyline happening.
I hope so. I hope that the A plot continues to hold to the book, even if they have these B plots, C plots, D plots happening, you know, in the same way that when you think about any sort of drama with multiple characters involved, a huge cast of characters, it's like when you watch a CSI, you still need to know when they find the body at the beginning, you still need to know at the end what happened to the body. And then the conversations that are happening between the detectives is going to continue, you know, that'll be series wide versus episodic, you know? So like figuring out how you can carry all these characters, but still fulfill the primary goal of the season, which is Penelope and Colin. But if they've already revealed to the watcher this big moment of truth, I think that the big turning points in the season for that primary plot point should be the reveal and reaction to this moment.
Yeah, I think so.
I hope.
You're right. It is 2 blocks of 4 episodes. And if I look at episode 1 is called Out of the Shadows. Episode 8 is called Into the Light. And then there's, episode 1 is Out of the Shadows. 2 is How Bright the Moon. 3 is Forces of Nature. 4 is Old Friends. 5 is TikTok, which makes me think maybe that's where the blackmail plot might come in. 6 is Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. 7 is Joining of Hands. And then 8 is Into the Light. Interesting. Yeah, I'm really curious to see what that break is going to be, like when it's going to happen and what they're going to keep in, especially with all the new characters they have added for the season. Although I will say I am so excited for Nicola Coughlan to just fucking kill it as Penelope. I love her. Dairy Girls, her new show Big Mood, I think it's called. She is so good. I'm a fan.
Can I ask you, why did you love the Bridgertons so much? What was it about the Bridgertons that made you want to reread them versus rereading another Regency?
Yeah, so I really like interconnected universes once they're finished. I hate when they're in progress because I just want to read.
I don't want to wait.
So a lot of books I read, like Lily Morton has a connected series that I really like, where it's not as linear as this one. But I like kind of following the same family. I like seeing characters in the background, or in the case of like Lily Morton's Connected Universe, for example, this character is this book. In the next book, it's their best friend and his boss. And the next book is the boss's brother. And in the next book, it's like the roommate of that. So everybody at the end of it kind of forms this interconnected web. Or, for example, coming up soon, being released is the Franklin University series, season 2. So last year, it's an romance series. It was a multi-author series. And the only thing that was constant was it was set at Franklin University. And it was just about all the students and the people different connected with the university. Season 2 is about to come out, which I'm really excited for. But I liked it because, again, you kind of get to see things happening in the background. So, for example, there's a scene in one of them that's like, oh, I went to this party and all of a sudden this guy went and jumped on this other guy's back and said, hey, have you met my boyfriend? And I was like, that was weird. I didn't know they were dating, because they have their own book. And that moment at this party happens at like the 3/4 mark in their book. So things are happening kind of off page. And I like the presence that gives, that things aren't linear. Like time is moving at the same time for many different people. They're just in different spaces. So I do like it. I like the idea that there's so many different tropes involved in this series, but at the end of it, they all, and you start to learn over time how close the family is and how much they can rely on each other. So especially as you get later into the books and you really start to understand who the characters are and the types of decisions they make, so that when, an example like a book 5, someone comes to the family and says, I'm really struggling with this, you have seen enough of that family to know, yeah, they're going to have their characters back. They're going to be present for them. They're going to support them in this. And they have this cushion to land on as they're going through this tough time with whoever their character is in that book. So it's just kind of like sweet and heartwarming and cute. And there's like real resolution, because you don't have to I wonder what happens to that character. You literally learn what happens to that character. And I like the book ending. I like the closing of the loop. And I find it really sweet. And it's kind of nice. It's just nice.
It's just nice. All right. Well, I think that does that wrap up our discussion on our preliminary discussion on the Bridgerton Prozaic Universe?
Mm-hmm.
And then we can come back and revisit it after we watch some of season 3.
Yeah. So we will be coming back in a couple episodes to talk about season 3 once it comes out. Very exciting. So to wrap up, Meg, what are you reading, writing, raving, or ranting about this week?
I'm going to go with what I'm reading, because it is such a complete departure from the conversation that we just had that it feels like
I love this.
It feels appropriate to be like, this is why I stopped reading Bridgerton, and it's because right now I'm reading a book about monster romances. Normally when I read monster romances, they are queer monster romances. This one is a straight monster romance, which feels a little bit strange to me. This is a book by Lily Mayne.
I love Lily Mayne.
I know. I loved her monster series.
I read the whole monster series.
Including the shorts, which I'm like I love when you get to revisit those characters again in shorts later on down the line. Like, I think that she does a really great job. This is a fairly new series that she has called Deep Earth Dating. It is straight, but one character is a monster, I believe, not an alien. It's a monster because it is a species that has risen up from inside the earth and now is a part of society. And so this book starts, it's called Berries and Greed, because the characters' names are Beryl and Greed. And it starts when this socially awkward demiurgus is the monster species. His girlfriend breaks up with him and he's very lonely, but he's socially awkward. He wants a roommate because he's lonely, but he doesn't just want he doesn't have any friends. It's like, how do I find someone who can live with me and be nice to me? And hey, there's this cult in my town where these people in this cult worship demiurguses, and maybe I can find somebody there who appreciates a demiurgus and wants to be my roommate. And he walks in and he's greeted by this high priest and realizes that, oh, this is a sex cult. These are people.
Choices?
This cult is about people who want to be mated to demiurguses. And so he feels very awkward about this and he wants to leave immediately, but he doesn't but the priest is like, oh, it's such a blessing to have you here. We're so thrilled to have you here. It's been 40 years since the demiurgus has come to the cult to meet with us. Just look at the people so that way they can see your beauty. And he's completely weirded out. It's like, okay, how fast can I get out of here? Great, give me the tour, show me the cult members, and then I'm getting out. And there's a line of cult members all in beige, and there's a woman in the back who has her arms crossed. And she's like, you are such a weirdo. I cannot, shooting him daggers. Just I can't believe that you came here to find somebody who wants to bone you. That's so weird. And he's like, I want her. Right? And then it's got this soft femdom. He's got some social anxiety. The roommates to lovers. And it's actually very sweet. But that's the weird shit that I'm reading right now. It is not this Regency romance. It is very weird monster erotica.
There are monster dicks here. There are
Oh,
monster dicks here. Welcome.
oh, I mean, like, but not just dicks. Like, this one has like spines that come out of
Appendages.
it. Yeah.
I will say, for those of you who have not read Lily Mayne and her monster series, her depiction of monster genitalia, I'll say, is singular. Singular is the word I'll use. But great series, though. I love her monster series.
Yeah, we can
Very
do it. We can
entertaining.
do a
Love
recap of the
that.
whole series at some point because I also love like, I didn't know that I loved dystopian romance, like dystopian futuristic romance
Mm.
military until I read
Mm-hmm.
Lily Mayne. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, sometimes you catch a trope and you're like, do I like the trope or do I just like this author? So
Yeah. True say.
there's
True
my
say.
reading. Hey, Nikki, what are you reading, writing, raving, or ranting about today?
What am I reading? So
I mean, you're
I
pretty
just
much
finished
raving about
reading.
Bridgerton for the last hour, but we'll let you talk about something
It's
else.
true. It's true. I just finished reading the newest entry into the Puck Boy series by Aidan Finley and Saxon James. It's book 6, and it is called Bromantic Puck Boy. So the Puck Boy series follows a bunch of hockey players in the NHL, who essentially they form over time like the queer collective. So it's a bunch of queer hockey players. Some of them are where the characters are both gay, some of them whatever. That Bromantic Puck Boy is a bi awakening bromance that turns into a real one. I love Eden Finley. I love Saxon James. Their books are always great. This is actually another interconnected universe series because there's 6 Puck Boy series about different like people, and eventually they kind of come together and become friends. And this one is so and so's roommate. Book 3 is this one, and it's their brother, and it's their teammate. Connected in that way. But it also connects to their Fake Boyfriend series, which is another co-written series they did. But I love Bromantic Puck Boy, one because I love the wordplay with Puck Boy and the NHL. But I normally, and I think we've had this conversation before, I do not like sports romances, especially queer ones. Straight ones, fine. Queer ones, I don't, because typically there's always a specter of being forced out of the closet and that affecting your career. Because in a lot of these books, the queer characters aren't out, and they don't want to be outed because either they're going to lose their endorsement deals, or people in the locker room are going to be shitty to them, or like there's always this thing of you could lose your career. And I read some football series like Beth Bolden's Condor and Piranha series, our football series like NFL. That thing is also always there. So I typically do not like reading queer sports books because I don't like
A forced outing
someone's
is not the way
career.
that you want
The forced
your
outing
third act
that can also
conflict
like
to happen.
that can also affect your career, or fans talking shit about you, or your teammates hassling you in the locker room. But the Puck Boy series, that it's not really there. And in Bromantic Puck Boys, actually, it wasn't at all, because it's a new rookie and the old veteran. The old veteran changes teams because in his previous city, which is where a lot of the other characters from the books are, in Seattle, he has like 3 ex-wives and so many girlfriends because he goes, I just get someone's number and then all of a sudden I end up married to them. Like, I am not good at this. So he's like, I need to get out of Seattle. So he asked for a trade to Nashville, which has a new rookie on it. And they kind of become friends, the young cocky guy and the veteran who's like, I can't be around women right now because I'm probably going to marry them. And the younger guy is kind of like his wingman. He's like, cool, I'll go out with you and help you get laid, but I'll also make sure that you don't marry someone, and keep you out of that. And they attempt to have a threesome, and the woman is like, I'm not into that. So they kind of just look at each other and go, bro, like, do you just want me to help you? Like, I'm cool with it. I had a girlfriend peg me. So I'm great with it if you're fine. And then that's how they start doing it. They have this bromance where they, quote unquote, help each other out. And then it's actually sweet. So when they do come out to their coach and their team, they're like, cool, do you want us to draft up like a PR statement, or do you want us to not do anything about it? They're like, we don't really want to come out right now. And they're like, cool, we'll have some stuff drafted just in case, but thanks for telling us. Have a good day. And then they decide to out themselves, because one of their rivals outs himself on TV, and they're like, well, shit, we kind of want to be out now too. Guess what? We're gay. So it was just like really nice. So Bromantic Puck Boy, Eden Finley, and Saxon James, huge fan. Good book. I'm loving it.
Very different than Bridgerton, both of our currently reading list. And I think that's a good thing. Like,
palate cleanser.
Yeah, the genre is so expansive that we don't just have to stick to one particular subcategory. Right. Well, we will be back in a month or so to be talking about our reactions to the Bridgerton series.
Very exciting. Keep an eye out. Thank you very much. As always, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. And we will see you in our next episode. But Lady Bridgerton says goodbye. Bye.